I told you, Christian Dassault is gonna get you killed.
We don't have a choice, Jason. It started again. A new program. And it's even worse than before.
What's that got to do with me?
Because it matters. It matters.
Not to me, it doesn't. What's that got to do with me?
Because it matters. It matters.
Not to me, it doesn't.
The case of the original Bourne trilogy is a curious one. See, it's hard to make a great movie, and it's even harder to make a great trilogy of movies. But what's even harder than that is to make a great trilogy of movies that gets better with each and every entry. There aren't many film trilogies in existence that have successfully pulled this off. Maybe there's 2, maybe 3, maybe even 4. But one of them is Jason Bourne. Bourne Identity, great. Bourne Supremacy, awesome. Bourne Ultimatum, simply outstanding. There was a thing called the Bourne Legacy too, but never mind that. Or maybe that's not fair to say. To be honest, Legacy wasn't a bad movie. Being bad wasn't its biggest problem. Its biggest problem was that it just couldn't reach the level of quality that the earlier films had built up. But even though Legacy maybe had devalued the Bourne franchise a little bit, I've gotta admit, when Matt Damon and director Greengrass announced that they would be returning to the series after all these years, I was pretty stoked. Maybe those two names were exactly what this franchise needed. Maybe now since they're coming back, this new 5th movie would lift the Bourne franchise back to its former glory. Maybe even above it. Maybe. But of course, when that said 5th movie was released, turned out the answer was one big no. We didn't get a movie on the level of Ultimatum. We didn't get a movie on the level of Supremacy or Identity. Instead, we got Jason Bourne. Honestly, Jason Bourne the movie feels very much like just another Bourne legacy. As in, it isn't bad, it isn't great, it just is. And that in turn begs the question of why? Why does Jason Bourne feel like just another legacy? I mean, Damon is back, Greengrass is back, their world of Bourne is back. So then, what's the issue? Why is the word mediocre the most accurate way to describe this new movie? And so here we are, my precious audience. Let's dive into 2016's Jason Bourne and try to figure out why it failed to rise up to the high bar set by the original trilogy. Why this film, more than anything else, feels so uninspired and mediocre. The biggest issue of Jason Bourne, at least to me, very quickly became very clear. This film isn't a new Bourne movie as much as it is a recycled compilation of older Bourne movies. As in, everything it has to offer we've seen done before and we've seen done better. Take all the action sequences of Jason Bourne, for example. No matter which one you choose, I guarantee you've already seen it. The Las Vegas car chase, that's a good sequence, full of speed and adrenaline. Honestly, I'd say it's a great sequence. The problem is, it isn't as great as the taxi chase in Supremacy. And even more, it has nothing new to add to the long list of Bourne car chases. We've heard the music, we've felt the crashes, we've seen the pit maneuver. Yes, this is the first time Bourne is the one doing the chasing instead of the one being chased, but I don't think that alone is enough. In my opinion, there's only 2 ways to justify doing a new Bourne car chase. Either make it different or make it better. And the Las Vegas car chase at its core does neither. Then we have the Athens foot chase. That's an exciting sequence, sure. But to be honest, I think I'd rather just watch the Berlin foot chase in Supremacy, where Bourne has to escape German SWAT teams and squads of police. Oh, but this Athens thing also has a motorcycle chase. Okay, that's fair. It's just that I already saw that motorcycle chase in Legacy. Plus, if I for some reason specifically want to watch Bourne and Nicky use a big protest as a cover to avoid CIA operatives, Supremacy's got that too.
Parsons' bus has just arrived at Syntagma Square. There's a demonstration in front of the Greek Parliament building. I think she'll use it as cover.
This is Survey 3. There's a lot of protesters here. There's no way we can cover out there.
Deploy Alpha and Bravo to the square.
Go, Delta, move, now!
Another highlight of Jason Bourne is the brutal hand-to-hand fight between Bourne and the evil CIA asset. A great fight. Just not as great as Bourne vs. Desh in Ultimatum. What's that you say? In the new movie, they battle without any background music and at the end, Bourne barely wins by strangling his opponent to death. Yup, seen that exact same thing. And of course, who can forget the big emotional moment where Nicky Parsons gets shot by the evil asset while she's driving off with Bourne? Well, I can. because I saw this moment in Supremacy already, and there it was much more effective because the woman getting shot was someone we and Bourne actually cared about. I could go on and on with this, but I'm sure you get my point. Then again, here's a couple more, just for good measure.
I think someone's coming.
And now he's come back to take my soul.
No.
Hello, Jason. It took a long time to get here, Jason.
This is not a drill, soldier.
Listen to me, David.
We clear on that?
I've done something.
Jason Bourne, the movie, begins with quick flashes from earlier Bourne films, and as it turns out, those quick flashes are the perfect analogy of what this movie is, a collection of earlier Bourne movies squeezed into one 2-hour film. Jason Bourne is the film version of a band re-recording its biggest hits into a new collection album, and while that re-recorded collection album isn't necessarily bad, what's the point of it? Why would I watch Jason Bourne when I can just go watch the original movies and see everything it has to offer there in a way that they're done better? Another weird thing I noticed about this movie is that for a movie called Jason Bourne, it really doesn't have much Jason Bourne in it. At the beginning of the film, I mean this quite literally. In the first 13 minutes, how much of that screen time is used to focus on this new older Bourne? The answer is 2 minutes. Let me say that again. The opening 13 minutes of Jason Bourne feature 2 minutes of Jason Bourne. And even during those 2 minutes, Bourne does absolutely nothing. He just broods around like he forgot his Batman costume at home and punches some shirtless dudes to the ground. Because apparently the filmmakers couldn't give him anything meaningful to do.
Anything on Bourne?
Nothing yet.
Any sign of Bourne? Not so far. He's involved in this somehow, I can feel it.
As soon as we get eyes on Bourne, I'll approach him.
No sign of Bourne.
What about Bourne?
Hang on.
What about Bourne?
Still looking for Bourne.
We don't even know if Bourne's alive.
Any news on Bourne? Nothing.
What the fuck?
After the opening, we do start getting more Bourne, but even then, he doesn't really do anything. He does take part in some cool action sequences, but he doesn't really affect the story itself. The movie is about Bourne's dad, but Bourne isn't the one who drives the movie forward. It's Nicky Parsons. Let me say that again. The story of this movie is about the father of Jason Bourne, yet the character who drives that story forward is this woman from earlier movies who nobody really ever cared about. And that makes you wonder, is this movie called Jason Bourne or is it called Nicky Parsons? When we start nearing the 1 hour mark, the most meaningful thing Bourne has accomplished so far is look at some files and witness an expository flashback. After this, luckily, he finally starts to change from a passive protagonist to an active one. And now, at long last, we the audience get to know his motivations a bit, which immediately makes this movie much more interesting to watch. But even so, when the credits roll, Bourne doesn't really accomplish anything. Look closely and you'll see that throughout the film he accomplishes pretty much nothing. In all honesty, you could cut Bourne off this movie entirely and it wouldn't have much effect on things at all. Bourne does cause the evil CIA chief to get shot to death and in effect have the young female agent take his place, yes. But then it turns out that she is just as crooked as he is, so it's not like that swap has any real meaning. Bourne also saved the CEO character from getting killed, true, but the only reason for doing so was that the CEO character would then expose the CIA, and that never happens, because instead of exposing anything, the CEO just keeps the information to himself. So whatever, Bourne might as well just have let him die. Wouldn't have changed a thing. The only real effect Bourne has in this movie is when he kills the evil asset guy. To be honest, the relationship between Bourne and the asset seems to be what this movie above all else is about, which is fine. But then my question is, what's with all this CEO tech surveillance stuff and CIA personnel change? If any of it doesn't lead to anything, why include it at all? Why not just cut it out and focus more time on developing the relationship between Bourne and the asset who murdered his dad? But we'll get to that soon enough. In a nutshell, if a movie is called Jason Bourne, then maybe Jason Bourne should be the one who drives the story of the movie forward. Jason Bourne should be an active protagonist, not a passive protagonist who gets swept up in the story and some cool action sequences. Don't start your movie with Nicky Parsons finding information on Bourne's dad. Start your movie with Bourne finding information on Bourne's dad. And just like that, your movie is a hell of a lot more compelling. What's interesting about the earlier Bourne films is that their subtitles serve as perfect summaries of what they are about. Identity is about Bourne trying to find his identity. Supremacy is about Bourne putting his fully developed superior skills and abilities to use. Ultimatum is about Bourne finally finishing the evil CIA Black Ops projects once and for all. Now, I know those subtitles are from the books, which have nothing to do with the films, true. But still, they do reflect the core points of the films. Even in Legacy, that movie above all else is about the aftermath and legacy of Bourne's actions and how they affect others. It is pretty fitting then that the new movie doesn't have a subtitle at all, because at the end of the day, it isn't really about anything. You could say that Jason Bourne is a story about Bourne's relationship with his dad and the evil asset guy who killed him, but it isn't. That's what the movie tries to be, yes, but that's not what it is. Because instead of properly building Bourne's relationship with his dad and the asset, the movie spends most of its time on 15-minute action sequences and some random technology company corruption stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with Bourne. You know how in Mission Impossible Fallout they managed to properly set up the relationship between Ethan Hunt and his former wife? You know how they do this? By spending actual time on it. The way that movie begins is with Ethan Hunt and his former wife, and because they do spend time on the wife, the ending works. The way it wouldn't have worked is if instead of beginning the movie with Hunt's former wife, we didn't see her until the very end at all, and every piece of information about her came as exposition from other characters. Like is the case with Bourne's dad. We hear about Bourne's dad from Nicky and we never actually see him until we're nearing the midpoint of Act 2 when Bourne has this very quick blurry flashback. It's hard for the audience to care about Bourne's dad when it seems that even Bourne doesn't give a crap about him. And how could he when he's so busy punching shirtless dudes and driving motorcycles and punching more dudes? Instead of starting your movie by showing us random flashbacks from earlier Bourne films, take a page from Tom Cruise's book and start your movie by showing us flashbacks about Bourne and his dad. Make Bourne push that relationship forward, instead of a random side character nobody asked to be in this movie in the first place. Show us that he cares, and maybe then we can care as well. Same with Bourne and the asset. This movie does have an interesting setup of there being some personal beef between them, but it never goes full in on it. Aside from the ending fight, Bourne and the asset never really interact. They don't speak, they don't bring up the topic of Bourne's dad. The only reason we even know there is beef between them in the first place is because that information is delivered to us as exposition by other characters, which is a bummer. A properly constructed rivalry between these two enhanced operatives would have been a very great thing to see. For the most part, it feels like director Paul Greengrass just wanted to do a bunch of action sequences, so they decided to aimlessly throw in some second-rate, underdeveloped story aspects as well, which would make sense since this movie doesn't have a proper writer. For the first time, they didn't bring back Tony Gilroy, who wrote all the earlier ones, because apparently there was some internal conflict with Ultimatum and Legacy. So instead, this film was written by Greengrass, who hadn't written a film in a decade, and his editor. That's right, Jason Bourne the movie wasn't written by a writer. It was written by the director and the editor. And here's the result. Yet another unnecessary and redundant Hollywood movie that suffers from the problem of style over substance. Or in this case, the problem of action over story. After 2016's Jason Bourne, only two questions remain. Should there be another Bourne film? And if so, how can it be done in a way that's fresh and innovative? Honestly, maybe the answer to the first question already is no. Maybe the original Bourne trilogy was a product of that time and now it's too late to successfully recapture what it did. Maybe the age of Jason Bourne is over. Maybe. But if another movie does get made, to me the only way it would be justified is if they make it a crossover between Bourne and Aaron Cross from Legacy. If this crossover idea already has you shaking your head, I understand why. But at the same time, I would love to see how Bourne and Cross play off each other, if done right. Because to be frank, a proper crossover between these characters really is the only way the new film can be something different. Take the Las Vegas car chase from Jason Bourne for example. It is cool, but it doesn't feel that special because we've seen it already. But now imagine this. Instead of just Bourne chasing the asset, we add Aaron Cross to the chase as well as a third party. And already the chase becomes something new and interesting, and therefore special. Jason Bourne the movie does have some very intriguing ideas, so take those ideas and properly develop them further in a new crossover. Make the crossover about some evil rogue asset who has personal beef with Bourne and Cross. Make this rogue asset the reason why Bourne and Cross are forced to come together, and actually focus on that relationship between Bourne and Cross and the asset. And also, please, for the love of God, trim down the real-life bad boy CIA stuff. I understand these CIA corruption things and operation rooms are a big part of the franchise. Fine. But at least to me, they've also always been the most uninteresting part. Because at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of nameless CIA people sitting in a room looking at monitors. I'm not saying take the CIA angle out, I'm just saying put it in the background. And instead, take most of your runtime and spend it on your main characters. Because at least in my opinion, if Jason Bourne the movie had cut the whole technology, surveillance, corruption stuff out, trimmed down the CIA stuff overall, and instead focused on the characters and their relationships, it could have been a much better movie. It could have been a movie that didn't turn out to be such a forgettable, mediocre failure that 2016's Jason Bourne unfortunately is. You know, at least in my opinion.
I don't believe that, and neither do you. Look at yourself. Jason, I came here because I found something. I'm telling you what I saw. It looked like he was involved directly. You've tortured yourself for a long time now, Jason. Jason, I came here because I found something.
That sounds about right.
There you have it, my thoughts on Jason Bourne the movie. If you got any thoughts of your own, comment down below. And also, I'd very much like to hear your opinions on the franchise's future. Should there be another Bourne sequel, and how can they make it work? Should it be a crossover with Bourne and Cross, or should they just do what Hollywood always does and reboot the whole thing? Comment below. Thanks for watching.